Dad, Uncle David is hiding in there.
The 8-year-old son looked at his father, who had just returned from the battlefield, pointed at the wardrobe, and said innocently, "Dad, Uncle David is hiding in there." In that single moment, everything Ethan had believed in for the past 8 years collapsed completely. The taxi pulled to a stop in front of the house at 47 Maple Street, the place Ethan had left 8 years earlier. He stepped out a military duffel slung over his shoulder, his faded combat boots touching the familiar sidewalk. 8 years. 8 years he had dreamed of this moment of coming home, of holding his wife, of hearing the laughter of the son he knew only through blurred photographs. The door opened. Rachel stood there. Her hair was still chestnut brown, just as it had been the day he left, but her eyes were different. They avoided his gaze. "I'm home," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Rachel." Ethan wanted to say so many things, but a sound from behind her made him forget them all. "Dad." Something was wrong. Uncle David Ethan's voice remained gentle, but it shifted to a different register. "Yes. He's playing hide and seek with me. He's hiding in Mom and Dad's closet. I already found him, but he told me not to say anything." "But now that you're home, I can tell you right." Liam giggled, completely unaware of the suffocating tension around him. Rachel went pale. "Liam, go upstairs." But Ethan was already standing. He walked forward steadily, each step landing on the floor with a low, even sound, like the beat of a war drum. There was no rush, no haste. Up the stairs, the familiar hallway, the bedroom door. Ethan pushed gently and the door swung open. The room was just as it was in his memory, the large bed, the sheer white curtains, and the oak wardrobe where he used to keep his uniforms. He stepped toward the closet. His hand closed around the handle. He pulled. Light flooded in, illuminating the face of a man crouched among the clothes. David, about 35, unshaven, wearing a rumpled dress shirt. The sharp scent of men's cologne mixed with nervous sweat filled the air. Time seemed to stop. Ethan looked at David. David looked at Ethan. Rachel stood in the doorway, all the color drained from her face. There was no shouting, no outburst of rage. What makes a warrior is not explosive strength, but absolute control, control of emotion, control of action, control of the situation. "Get out of my house." Ethan's voice dropped low, each word falling like a hammer. 5 seconds. David scrambled out of the closet and bolted through the door without daring to look back. Ethan closed the closet door, turned around, and looked at Rachel. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted, the woman to whom he had entrusted his entire future. Ethan began packing Liam's belongings. He moved through the house like a ghost, silent, efficient, leaving no trace of emotion behind. Rachel stood in the doorway, her hand gripping the doorframe so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. "What are you doing?" Her voice trembled. Ethan did not look up. His hands kept folding Liam's favorite jacket, the one with the superhero on it that he had ordered online for his son from halfway around the world. "I'm taking my son out of here." "You can't this time." Ethan looked up, his blue eyes cold as ice. "You brought an enemy into my home, Rachel. You no longer have the right to say anything." At those words, Rachel stepped back, her face drained of color. "You don't understand. 8 years. You were gone for 8 years. And do you have any idea how I lived through those 8 years?" Ethan's voice remained steady, but each word sounded as if it had been forged from steel. "Every night in a tent listening for strange noises, I thought of home. Every time danger closed in, I thought of you and Liam. The photo of you two in my wallet, that was the only reason I didn't give up. And yet..." He did not finish the sentence. Instead, he zipped up the duffel bag, the rasp of the zipper, cutting through the suffocating silence. "Where's Liam now?" "He's watching TV downstairs." "Good. I'll tell him his dad is taking him to visit his grandmother. Don't confuse him any more than this already has." Ethan slung the bag over his shoulder and went downstairs. Liam was sitting on the couch, eyes fixed on the animated show on the screen. The boy turned around, a smile blooming across his face. "Dad, look, this horse can fly." "Son, you and I are going on a little trip. We're going to visit Grandma." Would you like that?" Grandma Liam's eyes lit up. "Can I eat her cookies as many as you want?" Ethan tried to smile, but the smile felt frozen on his lips. The old pickup truck rolled out of Maple Street at 11 o'clock that night. Rain poured down in sheets, the drops slamming against the windshield as if trying to break through it. The wipers swept back and forth in a steady rhythm, creating a monotonous sound in the dark. Liam sat in the passenger seat clutching his favorite stuffed animal, a brown teddy bear Ethan had sent home from the base 3 years earlier. At first, the boy asked questions about the trip, about Grandma, about presents. Gradually, his voice grew softer, weaker, until he drifted off to sleep. Ethan glanced at his son. Streetlights reflected through the rain, casting shimmering streaks of light across Liam's innocent face. The boy's hand reached out and wrapped around Ethan's thumb, an unconscious gesture, as if even in sleep he needed to be sure his father was still there. And that was when the steel wall around Ethan's heart began to crack. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. His jaw clenched, but nothing could stop the tears from coming. The first tears he had allowed himself in 8 years, not because of Rachel, not because of a broken marriage, not because of betrayal, but because of faith. For 8 years, amid barren deserts and smoke-filled skies, Ethan had clung to a single belief that somewhere in this world there was a home waiting for him. A woman counting the days, a child growing up with the image of a heroic father in his mind. That belief was like a lighthouse in a stormy sea. It guided him through the darkest nights. It whispered to him when he wanted to give up, "Come home. They're waiting for you." And now that lighthouse had gone dark. The house, what he had called his final base, was no longer a place of safety. The person he trusted most had become the one who shattered everything. The truck pushed through the curtain of rain. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, and Ethan realized something painful. He was not afraid of the dangers of the battlefield. He was afraid of the wounds inflicted by those closest to him, wounds you cannot see but that cut to the bone. "Dad," Liam murmured in his sleep, his hand tightening around Ethan's finger. "I'm here, son. I'll always be here." That promise felt like an oath. Ethan could not protect his own faith anymore, but he would protect this child with everything he had left. The truck kept moving forward through the night, through the rain, through the pain. And somewhere ahead, the light from Grandma's house shimmered faintly like a fragile hope. The evacuation had begun. Not an evacuation from the battlefield, but an evacuation from the very house he had once called home. The white envelope arrived on a Thursday morning while Ethan was sitting on his mother's porch with Liam eating breakfast. Not from fear, but from the surge of fury rising from deep within, fury mixed with disbelief at a level of contempt he had never imagined. "Dad, why aren't you eating your pancake?" Liam's voice pulled him back to the present. I'm full, buddy. You go ahead and eat." Ethan tried to smile, but the smile froze halfway. Liam shrugged and turned back to his honey-soaked pancake. Ethan stood up and walked into the house, the envelope still clenched tightly in his hand. His mother was washing dishes in the kitchen and turned when she saw his face, concern immediately filling her eyes. "What's wrong, Mom?" Ethan handed her the envelope. "Rachel filed for divorce, and she wants to take Liam away from me." The older woman skimmed the document, her face tightening with each line. "She actually dared to use your medical records. That's what you went through serving your country. How could she? Because Mom," Ethan said quietly, his voice low like distant thunder, "she's no longer the woman I thought I knew. Or maybe I never really knew her at all." That night, after Liam had fallen sound asleep in the bedroom that used to be Ethan's, Ethan sat alone in the dark living room. In his hands was the medical report, the copy Rachel's lawyer had attached. Patient Ethan Brooks, age 34. Diagnosis, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Symptoms, frequent nightmares, exaggerated startle response to loud noises, hypervigilance, difficulty regulating emotions. Ethan closed his eyes. Images flooded back like a rising tide, nights waking, drenched in sweat, flinching at fireworks during holiday celebrations, moments when he had to tell himself, "This is home. You're safe." Yes, he had PTSD. He had sought out a military psychologist, attended therapy sessions, learned how to face his invisible wounds. That was nothing to be ashamed of. It was proof that he had confronted his pain instead of running from it. But now, Rachel had turned it into a weapon. She had transformed everything he endured to protect his country, to protect his family, into an indictment against him. "Am I dangerous?" Ethan whispered into the darkness as if asking someone unseen. "Am I a threat to my own son?" The question slithered through his mind like a poisonous snake, seeping into every corner. Self-doubt, the thing he had buried beneath the armor of a soldier, rose up with brutal force. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe he was broken. Maybe 8 years of war had turned him into someone unfit for normal life. Maybe Liam deserved a better father, a father who didn't flinch at sudden noises, who didn't wake in the night from nightmares, who didn't carry the heavy burden of the past. No. His mother's voice came from the doorway, startling him. She walked in and sat beside him, her wrinkled hand resting over his calloused one. "I heard what you were saying, and I want you to listen carefully to this. You are not broken. You are a wonderful father. You did things most people would never dare to do. You endured things most people will never have to endure. And you survived. You came home. You are here with Liam. That is what matters most. But Mom, she's right. I have PTSD, I can't. You have PTSD because you were brave enough to face hell and come back," she said, her voice turning sharp. "And Rachel, she's using your pain, the pain you carried for this country, as a weapon to take your son away. That isn't fair. That's cruel." Ethan looked at his mother, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm afraid of losing Liam, Mom. I'm not afraid of anything out there, but I'm terrified of losing my son." "Then fight," she said, squeezing his hand. "You fought for your country. Now fight for your child. Don't let these vicious accusations defeat you. You're stronger than that. You're better than that." Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the two figures sitting close together. And in the darkness, Ethan felt something stirring, not anger, not rage, but resolve. They wanted a war. He would show them how a real soldier fights not with brute force, but with perseverance, not with violence, but with steadfastness, not with hatred, but with love. Love for Liam, the only thing left worth fighting for. Thompson's law office was located on Main Street, an old, dignified building with patterned glass windows and a tarnished brass sign. Ethan stepped inside, wearing the only black suit he owned, a suit he had bought in a hurry from a discount store, still carrying the faint smell of new fabric. Mr. Brooks' attorney Thompson, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and gold-rimmed glasses, rose to greet him. But Ethan could not miss what flickered in the man's eyes. "I did what was asked of me. I came home, and I sought help when I needed it. That is not a crime, counselor. That is responsibility." Thompson nodded, but the look in his eyes did not change. "I understand, Mr. Brooks, but the reality is, in custody disputes, social bias runs deep, and a man with a background like yours will face more challenges." Ethan sat in silence. He felt as though he were standing before an invisible wall, a wall built of prejudice, fear, and ignorance. There was no breaking it with force. The only way through was slowly, patiently finding the cracks. "So will you take the case?" Counselor Thompson studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "I will. But you must understand, this will be a difficult fight. Rumors spread like wildfire in a small town. Within just 2 weeks, Ethan began to feel the shift. Curious looks when he walked into the grocery store, whispered conversations behind his back as he waited for Liam at the school gate. Awkward smiles from neighbors who used to wave cheerfully. David had done his work very efficiently. With the wealth from his family's construction business, he had bought influence. He told carefully twisted stories. Ethan Brooks came back mentally unstable. Rachel is trying to protect her son from a dangerous man. She's the victim, and people believed it. Because it was easier to believe, because it fit existing prejudices, because a veteran with PTSD sounded scarier than a poor woman who had been abandoned for 8 years. On Friday afternoon, Ethan went to pick up Liam from school as usual. The boy ran out, backpack bouncing on his shoulders, his face glowing. "Dad, I got a perfect score on my math test today." That's my boy Ethan, knelt and gently patted Liam's head. "Grandma will bake you something special when we get home." But before they could leave, a figure stepped out from the parking lot. David, wearing a tailored suit, his face bright with confident smiles. "Ethan, long time no see." Ethan straightened his hand, instinctively resting on Liam's shoulder, a protective reflex. "What do you want? I just want to talk." David stepped closer, his tone friendly but his eyes cold. "Rachel's very worried about Liam. She thinks that, given your condition, perhaps the boy should be with someone more stable." "More stable," Ethan repeated, each word bitten off clearly. "The man who hid in someone else's closet broke up a family and is now standing here pretending to care about my son." David scoffed. "You're angry at me, I get it. But the truth is you were gone for 8 years, Ethan. Rachel was lonely. She needed a real man." That was when something inside Ethan snapped. The fighting instinct honed over 8 years flared like fire. His fists clenched, knuckles cracking. Every muscle in his body tensed, ready to act. One swing, 1 second. Dad Liam's voice, soft, anxious. Ethan looked down. His son was staring up at him with bright blue eyes, eyes full of trust, full of love, full of a silent question. "What will you do, Dad?" And like a bolt of lightning, Ethan understood. This was not a battlefield. This was not a place where strength decided the winner. This was a different war, one where losing control for even a second would mean losing his son forever. This was what David wanted. He wanted Ethan to lose his temper, to react, to prove the accusations true. Ethan slowly unclenched his fists, took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, just as the therapist had taught him. "Liam, go get in the truck, okay? I'll be right there." The boy hesitated, then ran toward the pickup. Ethan turned back to David, his voice low and rumbling like distant thunder. "You want me to react. You want me to prove I'm the man they've painted me to be. But I won't give you that satisfaction. Because my son is watching. And I'll show him that real strength isn't about fighting, it's about knowing when to hold back." Ethan turned and walked toward the truck. Each step felt heavy, but he didn't look back. Because that was the real victory, not defeating an enemy, but defeating himself. Inside the truck, Liam took his father's hand. "You were really strong, Dad. Why do you say that?" "Because you didn't do anything. My teacher says the strongest person isn't the one who wins a fight. It's the one who knows not to fight." Ethan looked at his son, tears filling his eyes. This time they weren't tears of pain, but of pride. His boy understood. And that was all he needed. On Saturday afternoon, the slanting light of the late-day sun filtered through the living room window of Grandma's house, laying a warm, golden glow across the old rug. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by countless pieces of brightly colored Lego. Liam was hard at work building a castle, the grand project he had been dreaming about all week. "Dad, look, I finished the watchtower." Liam held up the completed Lego piece, his eyes shining with pride. "That's fantastic," architect Ethan said with a smile, gently ruffling his son's soft blonde hair. "I think this castle would be perfect with the drawbridge, too." "I think so, too." Liam bent down, rummaging for the right pieces. "Mom never plays Lego with me. She says she's too busy. But Uncle David played with me once." The red Lego piece in Ethan's hand froze in midair. "Uncle David," he asked, keeping his voice gentle, careful not to let the tension rising in his chest show. "Yes, he came over a lot. Back when Mom said you were away on a long business trip." Liam spoke casually, still focused on snapping pieces together. He played video games with me and bought pizza too. But Mom told me not to tell you because you'd be sad. Each word Liam spoke felt like another piece falling into place in a much larger picture, a picture Ethan was finally beginning to see clearly. This wasn't a single sleuthy encounter. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a long, hidden relationship wrapped in lies and secrecy. Do you remember when he started coming over? Ethan asked, his tone still calm, as if he were asking about something ordinary. Liam thought for a moment, his fingers gripping a blue Lego block. Not so much lately, but before that, maybe since first grade or second grade. He shrugged. I don't really remember. 2 years, maybe more. A powerful wave washed over Ethan, but this time it wasn't anger. It was clarity. Rachel hadn't betrayed him just once. She had betrayed him for years while he was away, while he trusted her, while he sent every paycheck home. Son, Ethan said, placing a hand on Liam's shoulder and looking straight into his clear blue eyes. Thank you for telling me. You didn't do anything wrong, do you hear me? You were just telling the truth, and the truth always matters. I don't want Mom and Dad to fight. Liam said softly, a hint of sadness in his voice. I just want us all to be together like before. Ethan pulled him into a tight embrace. I know, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make the wrong choices and we have to face the consequences. But no matter what happens, I will always be here for you. Always. That night, after Liam had fallen fast asleep, Ethan sat alone in Grandma's small home office. An old laptop sat in front of him, its bluish light reflecting off his face. Suddenly a thought flashed through his mind, a memory from 3 years earlier. The security camera. Before his final deployment, Ethan had installed a small camera in the living room, not to spy, but so he could occasionally see his son from far away. Rachel had known about it, but she had likely forgotten, or assumed he'd turned it off, but he never had. The camera was still connected to a cloud storage account, one whose password only he knew. His hands trembled slightly as he typed the web address into the browser. Logged in. Waited. Then, the familiar interface appeared, a list of video files stored by date. Ethan scrolled. Days when he was still home, days just after he left, days of separation. He stopped on a specific date, the time Liam said Uncle David began coming over regularly. Click. The video played. The image was clear. His living room. Rachel sitting on the sofa, David beside her. They talked. They laughed. Then David placed a hand on her shoulder, and what followed needed no explanation. Ethan fast-forwarded. Another video, another day, the same scene, evidence clear, undeniable. But what truly caught Ethan's attention wasn't what Rachel and David were doing. It was the moments when Liam appeared in the frame, coming down the stairs, innocently asking his mother something, while David quickly pulled away from Rachel as if nothing had happened. A performance repeated again and again, a layer of falsehood covering the truth. Ethan sat motionless, eyes locked on the screen. There was no anger, no rage, only cold clarity. Rachel, he whispered into the darkness. You think you can paint a picture of an unfit father, but you forgot that the truth always finds a way to speak. He downloaded every video, backed them up in 3 separate places, carefully noted the dates, times, and contents. This wasn't a battlefield of bullets and explosions. This was a legal battlefield where evidence was the most powerful weapon of all. The next morning, while Liam was having breakfast with Grandma, Ethan called Attorney Thompson. Counselor, I have evidence. What kind of evidence? Thompson asked, his voice still thick with sleep. Proof that my wife has been involved with David for at least 2 years while I was still in active service. Video footage from the security camera in our own home. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Thompson spoke, his tone completely changed. Are you serious, Mr. Brooks? Completely? Then we have a chance. Mr. Brooks, we really do have a chance. Ethan looked out the window where Liam was laughing and playing with Grandma in the backyard. The early morning sun bathed the boy in a bright, radiant light. And inside, Ethan, a spark of hope, one that had gone dark, The day he returned home began to burn again. Not hope for saving a marriage, but hope for justice. Hope for a future where he could be with his son. Hope that the truth, painful as it was, would ultimately prevail. Liam turned and waved at his father through the glass door. Ethan waved back a smile spreading across his face, the first genuine smile he had worn in many days. "Thank you, Liam," he thought. "You're not just my son. You're my most loyal companion in this fight." And now the battle had shifted, from defense to counterattack, from despair to hope, from darkness to light. Courtroom number 3 of the county courthouse on a Tuesday morning in October was filled with light streaming through tall glass windows. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his black suit neatly pressed, his tie perfectly straight. Yet no matter how composed he looked on the outside, a storm was raging inside him. Across the room, Rachel sat beside her attorney, a middle-aged woman with a stern face and sharp eyes. David was seated in the row behind them, his hand resting on Rachel's shoulder, a gesture that could be read as comfort or as a claim of possession. "Your Honor." Rachel's attorney, Ms. Martinez, began her opening statement with confidence. "This case is not about who was right or wrong in a failed marriage. It is about the safety and well-being of an 8-year-old child. My client, Mrs. Rachel Brooks, has raised Liam for 8 years while her husband was absent. Now he has returned with serious psychological injuries, diagnosed as post-traumatic stress disorder." Ms. Martinez held up a thick file. "These are Mr. Brooks's medical records: frequent nightmares, exaggerated reactions to loud noises, difficulty controlling emotions. Your Honor, is a man like this truly fit to care for a sensitive child?" The judge, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a weathered face, nodded, signaling her to continue. "We do not deny Mr. Brooks's service to this country, but the reality is war has changed him, and an unstable father represents a potential danger to a child." Attorney Thompson rose, ready to object, but Ethan placed a hand on his arm and gave a slight shake of his head. "Your Honor," Ethan stood up, his voice steady but carrying through the courtroom, "I would like to speak." The judge frowned. "Mr. Brooks, you have counsel to, I understand, Your Honor, but there are things only the person living them can truly say." A brief silence followed. Then the judge nodded. "Very well. You have 3 minutes. Ethan stepped into the center of the room. He did not look at Rachel. He did not look at David. He looked straight at the judge, the man who now held his son's fate in his hands. "Your Honor, I do not deny that I have PTSD. I have experienced things most people are fortunate never to experience. I have seen friends lose their lives. I lived in fear and uncertainty for 8 years. And when I came home, I was no longer the same man I was when I left." He paused, took a deep breath. "But I sought help. I faced my wounds. And I learned something: wounds do not make me weak. They make me value peace more deeply. They make me understand the importance of honesty, of trust, of family." Ethan turned toward Rachel. For the first time during the hearing, his eyes met hers. And lies destroy all of that. Ms. Martinez stood up. "Your Honor, these are unfounded accusations. I have proof." Ethan turned back and gestured to Attorney Thompson. "We have evidence." Thompson opened his laptop and connected it to the large screen in the courtroom. The video began to play. The image appeared: Ethan's living room. Rachel and David sitting close together on the sofa, unmistakably intimate. The timestamp showed the date 2 years earlier, when Ethan was still deployed. The courtroom fell completely silent. Only the sound of the video remained, laughter, conversation, gestures that needed no explanation. Then, the video cut to another moment. The same day, later that evening. Liam appeared on the staircase, clutching a stuffed animal, tears streaking his face. The boy's small voice came through the speakers. "Mom, I've been waiting for Dad to call since this afternoon." "Why hasn't Dad called yet?" Rachel in the video startled and pushed David away. "Go back to your room. I'm busy." "But Mom, I miss Dad." "Go to your room, Liam," Rachel snapped coldly. The boy turned away, his shoulders shaking as tears streamed down his face. In the courtroom, several people looked away, unable to keep watching. The video stopped. Silence filled the room. Ethan spoke, his voice, even each word landing like a hammer blow. While I was out there every day hoping to call home and talk to my son, what was my wife doing? She was busy with another man. And my son? My son was crying alone, waiting for a call that never came, not because his father didn't want to call, but because his mother was too busy to remember. Rachel collapsed back into her chair, her face drained of color. David stood abruptly as if to leave, but the judge slammed his gavel. "Sit down. No one leaves this courtroom." Ms. Martinez struggled to regain her composure. "Your Honor, this is a private matter and not relevant to my client's ability to parent." "Not relevant?" Ethan interrupted, his voice now charged with emotion for the first time. "She taught my son that lying is acceptable. She left my son crying alone while she enjoyed herself with another man. She turned our home, the place where my child should have felt safe, into a place filled with secrets and deception. And now she stands here and says I am unfit." He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have wounds, but my wounds come from serving my country, and the wounds my son carries, they come from the very person he trusted most, his mother." The hearing continued for another 2 hours, but the outcome had been clear from the moment the video was shown. When the judge struck the gavel for the final time, his voice rang out firmly. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court awards full legal custody to Mr. Ethan Brooks. Mrs. Rachel Brooks is granted visitation rights according to a court-established schedule. The gavel sounded like thunder. Ethan did not smile. He did not cheer. He bowed his head into his trembling hands, his shoulders shaking. Attorney Thompson placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, but said nothing, because there were no words for this moment. It was not joy. It was not triumph. It was release. Release from the fear of losing his child. Release from vicious accusations. Release from the darkness that had shadowed his life since the day he returned home. And yet the victory was painfully bittersweet, because it came not from happiness, but from the collapse of everything he had once believed in, from the destruction of a family, from the tears of an 8-year-old child. Ethan stood, wiped his eyes, and walked out of the courtroom. Outside, the afternoon sun spread wide across the steps, and there, standing beside Grandma, was Liam, clear blue eyes fixed on his father, filled with hope. "Dad, you won right." Ethan knelt down and pulled his son into a tight embrace. "I won, sweetheart. We won." And this time, it was the truth, not a victory of hatred, but a victory of love. The pickup truck pulled to a stop in front of the house at 47 Maple Street on a weekend afternoon. Ethan turned off the engine and sat there in silence, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. Beside him, Liam looked out the window and burst out excitedly, "We're home." "That's right, son. From now on, it belongs to just you and me." They stepped inside. The door creaked open with a dry, grating sound. The house, once filled with laughter, the smell of food, and the warmth of a family, now stood hollow like a bare skeleton. Rachel had taken most of the belongings. Only the basics remained: worn furniture, an empty refrigerator, and walls marked by faded paint. Liam walked into the living room, his voice echoing in the wide space. "Why is our house so empty, Dad?" "Your mom moved her things out," Ethan said evenly as he set his duffel bag down, his tone like someone reporting a simple fact. "But that's okay. You and I will fix it up. Make this place nice again. Can I choose the color for my room?" "Of course. Any color you want." Liam smiled faintly, then ran upstairs to look at his bedroom. The sound of his footsteps overhead echoed like lonely notes of music. Ethan stood in the middle of the living room looking around. Everything bore the mark of absence. The family photo that once hung on the wall was gone. Only a lighter rectangular outline remained on the yellowed paint. The chandelier he and Rachel had chosen together was gone. The hand-embroidered sofa pillows she had once proudly shown off to friends were gone as well. He walked into the master bedroom, the room where everything had begun to fall apart. The bed was still there, but bare without sheets or blankets. The closet, the place where he had found David, stood wide open with only a few lonely hangers inside. Ethan opened the bottom drawer. And there, Rachel had forgotten something, their wedding album. He pulled it out, sat down on the cold floor, and opened it page by page. The photos appeared like fragments of a dead world, Rachel in her pure white wedding dress, smiling brightly. Ethan in his military dress uniform, eyes full of hope. The two of them cutting the cake, dancing together, promising forever. Forever, Ethan whispered bitterly. Maybe forever only exists in photographs. He stood up, carried the album down to the living room, and stepped out into the backyard. The old metal barrel where they used to burn dry leaves in the fall was still there. Ethan set the album down and pulled a lighter from his pocket. "Dad, what are you doing?" Liam's voice startled him. The boy stood in the doorway, his eyes fixed curiously on the album. "Dad." "Dad's cleaning up, buddy." "That's Mom and Dad's wedding album, isn't it?" Liam stepped closer, pointing at the first photo. "Mom looks really pretty." "Yes. Your mom's very beautiful," Ethan said, swallowing hard. "Are you going to burn it?" Ethan was silent. Then he gave a small nod. "Do you hate Mom?" The question pierced his heart like a knife. Ethan knelt down and looked straight into his son's clear blue eyes, the same eyes as Rachel's, but still filled with an innocence she had long since lost. "I don't hate your mom, Liam. Hate is too strong a feeling, and it hurts both the person who carries it and the person it's aimed at. I'm just sad. Sad about what happened. Sad that we're not a family like we used to be. But you and me are still a family." Ethan smiled through tears. "That's right. You and me are still a family. And that matters more than anything." He lit the album. Flames flared up, devouring page after page. Smiling faces, promises, moments of happiness, all turned to ash in the wind. That night, after Liam had fallen sound asleep, Ethan sat alone in the pitch-dark living room. No lights, no sound. Only the steady ticking of the wall clock, like the heartbeat of a dead house. The nightmare came without warning. Half asleep on the sofa, Ethan found himself back in the desert. Sirens blared. The sky burned red. He ran, searching for his fellow soldiers, but all he saw were figures fading away into smoke and dust. Then the scene shifted abruptly. He was standing in the bedroom, opening the closet. David looked at him, grinning. Rachel stood behind David, her hand on his shoulder, her voice cold. "You were never here. You don't deserve this." Ethan jolted awake, a scream trapped in his throat. Sweat soaked his clothes, his heart pounding like a drum. He sat up, hands shaking, breath uneven. Moonlight slipped through the window, illuminating a small wooden box on the table, the box he had kept since coming home. Inside was a Beretta M9, a parting gift from his unit. He had removed all the ammunition and stored it elsewhere. But now, in the darkness and loneliness, he opened the box and lifted the gun. It was heavy, cold, familiar. 8 years, he whispered. I fought for 8 years to come home. And what did I get? An empty house, a broken marriage, a family that no longer exists. His finger brushed the trigger of the unloaded gun. The sensation brought something that felt like safety, the last shred of control in a world that had lost all control. Then, from upstairs, a soft sound reached him. Liam shifting in his sleep. Ethan lowered the gun, placed it back in the box, locked it. "No," he said to himself, his voice trembling. "I can't. I have responsibilities. I have a son." He stood up, went upstairs, and stopped at the doorway of Liam's room. The boy lay curled beneath the blankets, arms wrapped tightly around his teddy bear. His face was peaceful, angelic, and Ethan realized he had won the legal battle. But the battle with himself, with invisible wounds, with loneliness, with loss, was far from over. Monday morning began with the piercing scream of the smoke alarm cutting through the quiet of the house. Ethan rushed into the kitchen where a pan of eggs had burned, black smoke billowing everywhere. He turned off the stove, threw the windows wide open, and waved his arms frantically to clear the air. "Dad, why does it smell burnt?" Liam appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack in hand, his face scrunched up. I burned the eggs," Ethan said, turning around, his face smudged dark with soot. "You have some cereal, okay? I'll make a better dinner tonight." "You said that yesterday too." Liam shrugged, opening the fridge to grab the milk. Ethan stood in the middle of the mess, the scorched pan, the dirty stove, the haze of smoke, and felt a strange sense of helplessness wash over him. He could assemble an M4 rifle in 20 seconds. He could lead a patrol through the desert, but he couldn't manage a simple breakfast for his son. "Are you ready? I'll drive you to school." "Dad," Liam hesitated. "I don't have school today. It's Saturday." Ethan looked at the wall calendar. Saturday. He'd mixed it up. Again. 2 weeks later, nothing had improved. Ethan tried his hardest, but everyday life felt like a battle with no map, no plan, no preparation. He forgot to pack a raincoat for Liam on a rainy day. He arrived late to pick him up from school. He signed the wrong school forms. One Thursday afternoon, he went to pick Liam up and noticed the boy walking alone without the group of friends who usually surrounded him. Liam's face looked sad, his eyes red and swollen. "What's wrong?" Ethan knelt down and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Nothing, Dad." "Liam, look at me." "What happened?" The boy hesitated. Then tears began to fall, small, silent, tightly held back tears. "The kids. They said I don't have a mom. They said Mom left me because I was bad. They make fun of me and call me the kid without a mother." Ethan pulled him into his arms, feeling the small body tremble against his chest. "You are not bad, do you hear me? And your mom didn't leave you because of you. Grown-ups have complicated problems, but that has nothing to do with you. You are the greatest gift I've ever had. But Dad, I miss Mom. I want her here. I want everything to be like before." Liam sobbed, his face buried in his father's shoulder. Ethan didn't know what to say. He just held his son tighter, let the tears soak into his shirt, and felt his heart breaking into pieces. That night, after Liam had fallen asleep, Ethan sat alone in the kitchen with his phone in his hand. His mother's number glowed on the screen. He typed and deleted the message over and over. "Mom, I think I'm not good enough to raise Liam. I don't know how to do the things a mother does. Maybe Liam should stay with you for a while." His finger hovered over the send button. Then he stopped. Memories flooded in, not of the battlefield, but of small moments with Liam, the boy falling asleep on his shoulder during a rainy night drive, his hand gripping his father's thumb, the way he said, "You were really strong, Dad," when Ethan held back from hitting David, the Lego castle, and the words, "I like playing with you better." Ethan deleted the message. Set the phone down. "No," he whispered. "I can't give up. I fought to have my son. Now I have to fight to become the father he deserves." He stood and walked into Liam's room. The boy slept soundly, still clutching his teddy bear. Ethan sat beside him and gently brushed back his soft blonde hair. "I'm sorry I'm not good enough yet, sweetheart. I don't know how to do a lot of things. I'm not a perfect mother, but I'll learn. I'll try. For you." He leaned down and kissed Liam softly on the forehead. And in the darkness of the room, Ethan made a decision he would not let his scars, whether from war or from betrayal, stop him from becoming the father Liam needed. The next morning, he woke up early. He didn't cook eggs. Instead, he Googled easy pancake recipe. He watched YouTube videos on how to comb a child's hair. He wrote down Liam's school schedule in a notebook and set alarms for every important event. When Liam woke up, a plate of slightly burnt but edible pancakes was waiting on the table. Ethan stood nearby, smiling awkwardly. "I made pancakes for you. They might not be very good, but—" "You did it, Dad," Liam shouted, throwing his arms around him. "Thank you." And in that moment, Ethan realized perfection didn't matter. What mattered was effort. What mattered was not giving up. What mattered was love and perseverance. The scars might not have healed yet, but they were no longer bleeding. And that was the first step toward healing. The parent-teacher conference took place on Wednesday afternoon in a classroom filled with children's drawings and crooked, colorful handwriting. Ethan sat on a tiny chair, one meant for third graders, feeling awkward like a giant who had wandered into a land of little people. "Mr. Brooks," a gentle voice called out. He looked up. A young woman around 30, brown hair, neatly tied back, warm hazel eyes, stood in front of him with a sincere smile. "I'm Claire Mitchell, Liam's teacher." "Yes, hello, Ms. Mitchell." Ethan stood and shook her hand. "I hope my son hasn't caused any trouble. Liam is a very good child." Claire opened a folder and pointed to several drawings. "He's bright, sensitive, and very devoted to his father. He draws you in most of his family art assignments." Ethan looked at the pictures himself, and Liam holding hands playing ball, laughing together. In every drawing there were only the two of them. "No, Rachel. He does seem to be going through a difficult period," Claire said gently, because of the changes at home. "But you're doing very well." Ethan gave a rueful smile. "I don't think so, Ms. Mitchell. I burned dinner 3 times this week and I forgot his gym shoes yesterday." "But you're trying." Claire looked at him without pity, only understanding. "And that's what matters most. Liam doesn't need a perfect father. He just needs a present one." There was a brief silence. Then Claire tilted her head, her voice hesitant. "I'm sorry if this is too personal, but are you Ethan Brooks from the 3rd Marine Regiment?" Ethan stiffened slightly. "Yes, I served there." "How do you know my brother?" Claire paused, swallowing hard. "My brother was Marcus Mitchell." Sergeant Marcus Mitchell. The name struck Ethan like lightning. Marcus. The young soldier who always talked about his sister back home, who carried her photo in his wallet. Marcus, who had never made it back. Marcus's sister, Ethan, whispered, his voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I know you tried to save him." Claire smiled, though the smile was filled with pain. "My brother wrote about you. He said you were the bravest man he'd ever known." Ethan shook his head slowly. "I wasn't brave enough to save him. But you survived. And you're here being a wonderful father." Claire placed a hand gently on his shoulder, an unjudging, quiet gesture. "My brother would have wanted that. He always said a real soldier isn't someone without fear, but someone who overcomes fear to protect what they love." The following week, Claire appeared at Ethan's front door with a grocery bag and a smile. "I heard you might need a little help with domestic skills." Ethan chuckled awkwardly. "Who told you that Liam wrote in a class assignment that his dad is trying very hard but doesn't know how to do many things yet?" Claire stepped inside. "So I'm here as a friend, not out of pity, but to help." That afternoon, Claire taught Ethan how to cook pasta without burning it and how to fold clothes neatly. The school camping trip took place that weekend. Ethan volunteered as a parent chaperone along with Claire and a few other parents. Liam was so excited he could barely sleep the night before. "Dad, you'll teach me how to build a campfire, right?" "Of course. I'll teach you everything." That night, under a sky full of stars, they sat around the campfire. Liam leaned against his father. Claire sat across from them, the firelight dancing across her face. The other children laughed, told ghost stories, and roasted marshmallows. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly to Claire, "for everything. I didn't do that much. You did more than you realize." Ethan looked at Liam, grinning from ear to ear, his face glowing in the firelight. "You showed me that I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be there." Claire smiled. "My brother used to tell me, healing isn't about forgetting the past, it's about accepting it so you can move forward. I think that's what you're doing. I still have wounds. Everyone does," Claire said gently. "But wounds don't define us. How we respond to them does." Ethan looked at his hands that had once held a rifle, that had once trembled in the dark, now resting protectively on his son's shoulder. And he realized something: he deserved happiness. Not because he was unscarred, but because he had been brave enough to face his scars. Dad looked. Liam pointed up at the sky where a shooting star streaked past. I wish I could stay with you forever. Ethan pulled his son close, tears welling in the darkness. Your wish already came true, sweetheart. And in the warmth of the campfire beneath the star-filled sky, Ethan felt his heart, once frozen, once shattered, begin to beat again with the rhythm of hope. Spring arrived, carrying peach blossoms that fell like white snow along Maple Street. A year had passed since the court ruling, a year filled with change, with learning, with healing. House number 47 now looked completely different. The walls had been repainted a soft blue, the color Liam chose because it looks happy. The backyard was filled with rose bushes and fresh green grass. A new swing had been installed beside the old oak tree. And most importantly, there was no longer any trace of the painful past. Ethan stood on the front porch, a mug of hot coffee in his hand, watching Liam play with Max, the golden retriever they had adopted 3 months earlier. The boy, now 9 years old, taller and more confident, threw a ball for Max to chase his laughter echoing across the yard. Dad looked at Max. He caught it. That's my boy. Max is a smart one. Ethan waved back a wide smile spreading across his face, a genuine smile, no longer strained like it had been a year ago. Behind him, the door opened softly. Claire stepped out, holding a book in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. She sat down in the chair beside Ethan, her brown hair falling loosely over her shoulders, her gentle eyes resting on Liam. He looks really happy, Claire said quietly. So do I, Ethan replied, his voice sincere. They sat in a comfortable silence, the kind that exists only between people who understand one another without needing words. Claire had become an indispensable part of their lives, not as a replacement, but as a companion, a healer, someone who brought light into their darkest days. Ethan's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. Rachel. A year ago, that name might have startled him, tightened his chest. Now he felt only calm. Excuse me, I need to take this, he said to Claire, then stepped inside. Ethan, Rachel's voice came through slightly unsteady. How are you? I'm fine. What do you need? Could I see Liam? It's been a long time. I miss him so much. Ethan was silent for a moment. In the past, he might have refused immediately, letting resentment guide his decision, but now he had learned that forgiveness is not for others, it is a way of freeing oneself. Okay. I'll ask Liam if he wants to see you. If he does, I'll arrange it. But Rachel, I hope you understand this. Liam comes first. Not me, not you, him. I understand. And Ethan, I'm sorry. For everything, I know, Ethan said quietly. I've learned that holding on to the past only keeps us from moving forward. I won't forget what happened, but I choose not to let it define our child's future. The call ended. Ethan returned to the porch and sat down beside Claire. Rachel, she asked gently. Yes, she wants to see Liam. I'll let him decide. Claire nodded. You've changed a lot, Ethan. A year ago, you couldn't have stayed this calm. A year ago, I was still fighting ghosts in my head, Ethan said, looking at her with gratitude. But you helped me realize something: the real war isn't out there. It's inside us. And the only way to end it is to choose peace instead of hatred. As evening fell and the sun began to set, Liam ran over sweaty and flushed with happiness. He sat down on the steps beside his father, Max stretched out at their feet. Dad, I really love this house. Why is that? Ethan asked, brushing his son's hair. Because I feel safe here. You're here. Miss Claire is here. Max is here. There's no yelling here. No secrets. Everything here feels real. Ethan pulled him close, feeling the small heartbeat against his chest. You know what, I feel the same way. Liam looked up, his clear blue eyes shining in the glow of the sunset. The war's over, right, Dad? Hearing that, Ethan looked around the freshly painted house, the green garden, Claire smiling softly, Max asleep, and Liam, the son he loved more than anything, nestled in his arms. Yes, sweetheart, Ethan whispered, tears of happiness rolling down his cheeks. I'm really home now. Not home from the battlefield, not home to a particular building, but home to a state of the soul where he was accepted, loved, and allowed to be himself without wearing the mask of a warrior. Claire watched them and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, a gentle, meaningful gesture. And in that moment, beneath a sky painted pink and orange by the setting sun, Ethan understood a simple yet profound truth. A home is not built of bricks and mortar. It is built of loyalty, unconditional love, forgiveness, and the courage to move through pain in search of hope. He had fought on many battlefields, distant deserts, cold courtrooms, and deep within his own heart. And now, at last, he had won. Not because he was the strongest, but because he had learned to be vulnerable with courage, to hurt with honesty, and to love without conditions. Dad Liam murmured sleepily, "What are we doing tomorrow?" Ethan smiled and kissed his son's forehead. "Tomorrow we'll keep building our life, one day at a time, one moment at a time, because that's how people truly live, not by avoiding pain, but by choosing happiness, even after pain has passed." And as the stars began to sparkle in the night sky, the three of them, a father, a child, and a woman who carried light, sat together in the peace of a home built not on perfection, but on love and perseverance. The war was over, and Ethan was finally home. The story of Ethan and Liam reminds us that the strongest father is not the one who has never fallen, but the one who dares to stand back up, dares to heal, and dares to stay by his child's side when every belief has collapsed. All it takes is one adult who is steadfast enough and loving enough for a child to always have a place to call home. If this story has touched you, please follow and share it to help spread journeys of truth, responsibility, and fatherhood. Because somewhere out there are still Liams in need of a safe embrace, and Ethans who need to know that their choice not to give up can save an entire childhood.